Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The calendar has turned to May, and with spring football in the rearview mirror, it's time to take a look at the state of the Purdue football program as it readies for year two of the Ryan Walters era. We'll look back at the spring game before taking a sky view of the roster and looking ahead a little bit to what's to come this fall. Plus, two more Purdue players heard their name called in the NFL draft. We'll take a look at those two and the current state of affairs for the pro Boilermakers. If you don't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Going to be coming at you regularly. Going to try to do every week throughout the summer. No promises on that, but that's the goal here. And be sure to follow along on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. There's always stuff to talk about. It's college sports. There's never a real downtime. So be sure to follow along on Twitter to keep up with all the news and notes. It's been a little while since we talked about football here on this show. Originally, I was going to record earlier this week, but with the transfer portal window closing, kind of as I record Wednesday night, this morning at midnight, the transfer portal window closed. I wanted to make sure there were no last-minute surprises. There were rumors out there, wanted to see if those actually came to fruition. They did not. So nonetheless, wanted to record now. Basketball is done. We've fully wrapped up the season on the show. Let's take a post-spring look at the football program and where it is. The spring game took place a few weeks ago, April 13th. After that, there was one more practice. There was a fishing trip, and the team broke for the end of spring ball. The portal is now closed. All the players who wanted to enter the portal have to have entered by now. That doesn't mean that everyone has to have found a landing spot. Guys who are in the portal, to a certain degree, have unlimited time to make their decision, but guys can still go into still make their decision. But Purdue's roster is relatively solidified. The spring departures weren't exactly earth-shattering. So let's take a look here. And we'll start with the spring game. Look, spring games are what they are. You can't take a ton away from them because they're only worth so much. They are wonderful for getting fans out to the stadium. They are wonderful for fan interest. You can get autographs, you can get pictures, all that good stuff. You get some decent weather. You get a nice spring day, which is always 50-50 in West Lafayette, Indiana. Then it can be a really nice experience for the program. If it's rainy, if it's cold, it is what it is. It's a chance to get a little bit of a glimpse at the team, and from a pure football standpoint, you get a little bit of evaluation in a game-like setting. But what they are is incredibly limited in what you can gather from them. For starters, spring games are always zero-sum, right? If the quarterbacks and wide receivers are looking great and moving the ball up and down the field, what does that say about your defense? If the pass rush is dominant and living in the backfield, do you have an offensive line problem? If your defense is just all over the place and your quarterback can't complete a pass, is he the problem, or is the secondary that good? It's all for what it's worth because it's a zero-sum game. It's also very controlled. Spring games are very vanilla in terms of play calling, in terms of schematic stuff. Coaches don't want to put a lot on tape. Coaches are pretty stubborn, pretty paranoid folks. They're not going to empty out the full arsenal for a spring game. It's going to be fairly basic. And now in more recent years, you've seen the contact get really limited. In Purdue's spring game, for example, when the ones were out there, it was blown dead at contact. It was essentially two-hand touch. That's not always been that way, but who can blame anyone? If you lose a starter in the spring game for the season due to an unnecessary injury, you look like a fool. So it is what it is. Just some thoughts from Purdue football overall that you see in the spring game, Purdue needs its receivers to be dynamic this season. You had some guys not play in the spring game. The Morissette guy from Georgia. I don't have the stats handy, but the CJ Smith guy from Georgia. Purdue needs its receivers to be really dynamic. Purdue lost Deion Burks. And while I've been pretty open here that Deion Burks was fine last year, early returns from Oklahoma are really, really positive about him. So, Purdue certainly lost something there, and that doesn't help. You've got to find guys who can really be dynamic. Now, was Purdue in a great spot having to play him on the outside? No. Purdue wasn't maximizing his abilities by playing him on the outside, but Purdue didn't have much of a choice. Purdue kind of had to do whatever it could. So, it is what it is. That needs to be a position of strength for Purdue this year, though. Hudson Card should finally be healthy. That helps. But Purdue, CJ Smith did play. Sorry, I was pulling up the stats there. So did Morissette. Weird. Very limited, though. These guys only got a couple of receptions apiece. Purdue needs that pass game to really be dynamic this year. I think the defensive backfield is going to be better. That's a position where I'm very confident Purdue's going to be better than it was last season, mostly because I don't know how much worse it can get. And I don't say that to be overly critical, but Purdue was last in the Big Ten in pass defense. Purdue was last in the Big Ten in total defense. So when you start there, you've got to go up. Keep in mind, Purdue was throwing a true freshman, Derek Rogers Jr., out there early last season. Purdue played the last 2 or 3 games with Zion Steptoe starting at corner. That dude was a wide receiver until late September, early October. Purdue was struggling. There was the call to put Cam Allen on the bench, but who do you replace him with? You couldn't. There was no depth there. Now you've brought in some guys, Kedrick Breedlove, Nyland Green. Those guys are going to be instant starters. Can Salim Turner-Muhammad stay healthy a little bit? That room is a lot better than it was last year. But you still saw, against the ones, there was the long touchdown in the spring game to Andrew Sawinski. Complete blown assignment. He was wide open. And that stuff just, you can't have that. I don't know that Ben Freehill is going to be Purdue's starting kicker, but seeing him make his field goal attempts was wonderful if you're a Purdue fan. Last year, kicking was just such a problem for Purdue. You'll remember the Ohio State game, Purdue misses 3 just chip shot field goals, and all year it was remarkably inconsistent. Freehill had to miss some time there. Julio Macias struggled. He's no longer with the team, but Purdue's got to be more sound on special teams this year. Purdue didn't punt during the spring game because it didn't have a punter. That's now been resolved. Purdue does have a punter now. But special teams, that's a huge area. The biggest takeaway from the spring game, though, is that Purdue seems to have avoided major injury. That's your biggest thing. That is priority number 1. In the modern era of college football, depth is very, very relative. You can feel decent about your depth, but what does that look like now? Does that mean you're comfortable with your 2 deep? I don't think you're ever going to be comfortable beyond your 2 deep. It's too hard to have keep guys on your roster who aren't going to play unless they're true freshmen. That's really hard to do these days. Purdue avoiding injury is just paramount. And now you hope that can continue into fall camp, because with the schedule Purdue has, the Boilermakers need all hands on deck. And as you just look overall at this roster, I think it does look better than it did at this time of season ago. This time of season ago was weird. You've heard Ryan Walters talk about how Purdue only had 60-some guys on the roster, how Purdue was really struggling to get guys out of the portal. That's difficult. That problem doesn't exist anymore. Purdue had a much more productive portal cycle. Purdue brought a decent amount back. It's not like Purdue's super high in returning production, but it brought enough back that you're comfortable with some of that. I think you filled some areas decent through the portal, and when you analyze the roster a bit, at quarterback, for example, the depth already looks better than it did last year. Why do I say that? Well, in the spring game, Marcos Davila's running with the twos, true freshman out of Texas, and he looked decent doing it. He had the really nice throw down the sideline. I think it was to Tremar Harris. Maybe. Struggling now. It's been a little bit since I watched the spring game, but a really nice throw by him. If Purdue's got something there, that's huge because you're going to have to replace Hudson Card. So that's a very welcomed development if that's real. If not, we'll see. But him getting the nod to go out with the twos first, that tells me he's above Ryan Brown, he's above Bennett Meredith, and those guys were your 2 and 3 in whatever order last year. So the depth already appears to be better. I think the offensive line is significantly upgraded, and you see that where a guy like Muhammad Musa is now sliding in to play guard. That's big. That's really big. He had a rough year last year. He wasn't always healthy. But if you're confident to bring that starting tackle in to play guard, that's pretty big because that's the opposite of what you were doing last year when you had to kick Marcus Bowe out to tackle from right guard. Marcus Bowe did a fine job, but he's a really, really good guard. So I think you feel comfortable with what you have there. The Ball State kid, the New Mexico kid, I think you got some transfers in there that can really play and add to that depth because you still have some guys, like watching the spring game, Jake Butt talked about how Jalen Grant was a starter for Purdue last year at guard. He's now running with the twos. That's good. It's been a long time since Purdue had a legitimately good offensive line. The one in 2021 was solid. Anything you can do to improve on the O-line is dramatically welcomed. I think at inside linebacker, you like what Purdue has. Now, that comes as a catch-22 because Kydron Jenkins is going to make the inside linebacker room better. He's also going to make the edge rusher room worse by leaving. So take that with a grain of sand, but he's going to be a good player there. That's where, if he's going to make it at the next level, that's where his impact is going to be. He's an inside backer at the next level. He's not big enough to play the edge. So what he does this year will be really interesting to see. You've got Yanni Karlaftis back. He had a really nice season a year ago. That's about it. Clyde Washington hit the portal. I think the writing was on the wall there. Purdue doesn't play a lot. Purdue plays 1 to 2 linebackers, middle linebackers on the field at once. So it's a smaller room. If you can stay healthy there, that's a pretty good one too. If not, we'll see what depth looks like there. I'm not positive what Purdue has behind them, but that's a good one too. And as I said, defensive back. Dylan Thieneman leads the group. Nyland Green is an extremely talented guy. Early returns on Kydrick Breedlove, very solid. Salim Turner Muhammad is starting to play. Can he stay healthy? That's almost I'll believe it when I see it. You'd love to get him out there. You'd take as many bodies as you can. Derek Rogers is back as well. He got some good, valuable experience as a true freshman. Botros Alessandro, Markevius Brown. That's a much, much deeper room at corner than it was a season ago. You bring in Antonio Stevens is going to play a much bigger role this year. Kind of his first time really being an impact guy. What will he look like? That room just got a lot better. And you've got some talented freshmen coming in as well. If they can add to that, you might have something pretty decent in the secondary. Got to have a decent secondary because that is the foundation of a Ryan Walters defense. And if Purdue never figures out the secondary, it's going to be in real trouble long term, trying to run the defense that Ryan Walters runs. I think edge rusher at this point is definitively worse if you're Purdue. You lose Nick Scorton to Texas A&M. Looking at some of those way too early mock drafts right now, he's a top half of the first round pick. Those, again, are way too early for a reason. Undoubtedly, though, a very talented guy, one of the more talented guys Purdue has had in recent memory. That loss really, really hurt. That was a big blow. And then you drop back Jenkins to inside backer. Edge rusher is going to be an interesting one. Will Helt flashed in the spring game. He looked good. He looked good last year as a true freshman, too. That's a tough position to ask a true freshman to go play at unless he's just truly a freak of nature physically. That's an adjustment. Going against Power 5 offensive tackles is a big adjustment. Helt did a good job last year. He could be due for a bit of a breakout season. You bring in Cheetah Silla. You've got the Georgia guy C.J. Madden. You have Jaire Otaja from Franklin College. We'll see. That room is much more potential than it is proven production at this point. But asking Purdue to replicate what it had last year when two guys combined for 17.5 sacks, that's a pretty big ask. I think the defensive line as a whole, too. You look at the interior, Isaiah Nichols, Malik Langham, those guys weren't world beaters for Purdue last year, but they were productive guys. I think they were both honorable mention, all Big Ten. Those are guys you got to replace. You've got Jeffrey Emba, the Auburn transfer who was there a year ago. Can he kind of take a step forward? Jamarion Harkless. DeMar-J. Lewis, is he finally healthy? Cole Brevard is a guy who's been around for a while. This has got to be his last year. Can he go out strong? Maybe Joe Strickland finally makes an impact. I'm just kind of looking at the spring game stats here. Mo Amonade, a solid piece in there. I'm sure I'm forgetting a guy or two, but what do you have there? Because Purdue did stop the run fairly well last year. If it can do that again, then you feel with a better secondary like this defense could take a step forward, even if the edge rushing, the pass rush, isn't as good as it was a season ago. Running back is a bit TBD. Tyrone Tracy leaves. You replace him with Reggie Love. Can Devin Maccabee have a little more consistent of a year? Some fumble issues really plagued him last year. Don't have a ton of depth there. Christian Womack hopped in the portal, so Purdue's pretty thin depth-wise there. Needs those top two guys to stay healthy. And then wide receiver. It should be better. It better be better, but we'll see. The proof is going to be in the pudding there. I think the tight end room looks really good. Max Clare coming back from injury. George Burhan with what he did in the Old Oak and Bucket game last year. He looked fantastic in that one. True freshman, Tavion Galloway. Can he play a role? I think you feel pretty... The tight end room looks promising. And then special teams is a big old question mark. You've got the freshman kicker Spencer Porath from Brownsburg. Purdue just brought in a transfer punter, Keelan Crimmins, I believe, from Mississippi State. Long snapper just came in as well. So special teams is going to look all new. That's not always a bad thing, though, because it was not a position of strength for Purdue a season ago. With the portal winding down, Purdue is pretty full on scholarships at this point. There's not a ton of room, but if you've got space, and especially in football, scholarship stuff always works itself out. I could not tell you the last time I heard of a team having scholarship problems in going into fall camp. But you're not in a spot to turn away guys who can help this season's team. If a guy can be in the 2 deep, especially pushing to be on the, be in the first 22, you take him. It's not a win now mode necessarily. Purdue's still trying to build something pretty long-term successful here, but Purdue needs a good showing this fall. And if you can pick up a guy on the defensive line, if you can pick up a guy at corner, again, the spring portal is limited. It's not the easiest place to go get ready-made talent. Some of the talk around the sport is that the spring portal was a little underwhelming in terms of what appeared and what was available for the pickings there. But we'll see. I think this roster is pretty much finalized, and I think you go into the fall feeling like you have a better roster, knowing you're going to go up against a really tough schedule. There's going to be a lot more time to preview that, but that's the dynamic that Purdue's going into fall with. Over the weekend, 2 more guys got drafted into the NFL from Purdue. Tyrone Tracy goes to the Giants in the 5th round. Sanoussi Kane goes to the Ravens in the 7th. Tyrone Tracy going in the draft, good for him. That's a really, really cool thing to see. That is as much of a transfer portal success story as you're going to find for a guy going Power 5 to Power 5. He goes to Iowa, up and down career there, never really found his stride per se. Now, he wasn't in a passing attack that was going to give him a ton of ability to succeed, but he even came to Purdue and couldn't put it all together at receiver. Plays his last year at running back and was excellent. 6 yards per carry, really, really good year. Demonstrates the ability that he gets drafted. It wouldn't shock me if he worked out pretty well in the league. Now, he's on the older side, being that he played 6 years in college. He is a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield, though. He can run. He's not the fastest guy, but it wouldn't shock me if he put together a decent career in the NFL. He, last year, outside of Dylan Thieneman, he may have been like the number 2 bright spot on Purdue's team. He had the kickoff return for a touchdown against Fresno State. Second half, can't remember if that was the opening kick or not, but that was big time. He had a great season. He had a really good year. And then with Sanoussi Kane, a quietly productive career. Played a big role each of the last 2 years for sure. Started most every game. Kind of bounced around. I listened to his post-pro day interview, and he's right. He was asked to do a lot of things for Purdue. I think back to the Music City Bowl, where he was asked to play a cover corner role. Did so to the best of his abilities. Then he plays more of a deep safety in the defense with Ron English before playing more in the box last year. He played a lot of different roles for Purdue, did so well, had the game-saving fumble recovery against Florida Atlantic. He had a good career. He had a real nice career. Good for him on getting drafted. I was very surprised that he left Purdue. I thought he would take a COVID season, but nonetheless, he gets his shot now. He's out there. Purdue had a lot of undrafted free agents. We'll see how many stick. That's always kind of the great unknown because some guys really do stick and hang around, whereas others will be gone in a week. That's the reality of the business. So it feels like there are more undrafted free agents now than there used to be. Maybe that's true. Maybe I just pay more attention now, but we'll see what things look like when fall camps begin in the NFL in terms of those guys. But Purdue's got to just keep adding guys to the NFL. There was a real downturn there 2017, 18, 19 as Purdue rode, the NFL guys were Danny Hopes and Daryl Hazels, and there just wasn't a lot of them. Those weren't good Purdue teams. Purdue starting to rebuild that a little bit. Some of those Brom guys, George Karlaftis, Derek Barnes, Raheem Mostert still hanging around, had a great year. Aiden O'Connell, Payne Durham flashed towards the end of last year. What can Charlie Jones do? Can David Bell start to break out a bit? Yeah, there are guys out there for Purdue. Rondale Moore, Jawan Bentley. Most of those guys, besides Mostert, are all Brom guys. Purdue started to rebuild its group of pros, and by no means is having the most guys in the NFL or having more guys in the NFL going to magically make your program better, but it sure doesn't hurt to be able to say, hey, last 2 Super Bowl champions, George Karlaftis is out there. He played here. Detroit Lions, Derek Barnes playing a big role. It doesn't hurt anything. So fun to see that if you're a Purdue fan. Fun to see that if you're a Purdue coach, being able to tout that a bit. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thanks for joining me for some football talk. Next week, the academic year will be officially in the books. Going to look back at the year that was. A year of new beginnings for football, and a year that felt like a grand culmination for men's basketball. So just going to take a look back at some of the stories of the year for those 2 sports and have some fun with it. If you got any questions for that, send them over on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can also email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Be back next week. Until then, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and take care. This episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-692-7463 or email me at jordan.jones@informbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks.